Today, we're going to be making a fun-tastic border. I have collected a few papers from a variety of collections. I've selected papers based on my photos. I wanted some green, a little orange and yellow, and quite a bit of a lavender purple. Purple ice, I think, is what Creative Memories calls it. And so, what I plan on having here is to make a mat for these photos. I have two sizes. I noticed that this one's a little bit larger, and I don't think I want to trim it down. So I'm going to let it stay the size it is and make a block mat to put all the photos on together. Lately, I've noticed I'm enjoying doing that. So I'm trying to determine the size of the block I would need to put a nice mat around all of my photos. So I've kind of put them on my 13 by 13 inch mat here, and this is what I'm noticing. They are not all the same size. They're the same width, but they are not all the same height. And that really doesn't matter. This was a great way to figure that out before I started cutting paper. And from the looks of this, I'm going to start with probably a nice round number of 8 inches tall by 9 inches wide. And I believe those numbers will give me a block that is a good size. I could probably get by with 7 3/4 inches tall. But I'll cut away the 1/4 inch if that doesn't look right to me. But right now, round number, make it 9 inches wide, 8 inches tall. My paper is a little directional on the back, but on the side I'm using, it's not directional at all. I like that. So to preserve as much as possible of the paper that remains, I'm going to cut the smallest number first and then the larger number. And the smallest number is 8. So I'm going to cut the 8-inch piece first because that will leave me with 4 inches. Whereas if I cut the 9-inch piece, it would only leave me with a 3-inch. So this is a nice piece for a future layout. And now I'm going to cut this by 9 inches. And this too is a nice scrap. So now I've sort of laid my pictures on this block about the size and spacing that I want. And so I'm going to go ahead and adhere them down. Okay, now we have our photos placed on our 9-inch by 8-inch block. And I'm going to put them on this gradient background paper. And so I'm pleased that I have the greens, the oranges, and the yellows. So I'm going to add this purple ice paper to pull in all the colors that stand out in the photos. And as a scrapbooker who is very monochromatic, I'm definitely coming outside of my comfort zone here, but I am liking the results right now. So I'm about to pull out my favorite tool, these custom borders. And I've been using them quite a lot. So I'm pulling out my favorite tool, the custom border system. So this side, I believe, is called the wave. And this side is called the ripple. And I haven't been using the ripples much, so I'm going to use it today. So our custom border templates have 3 little lines here, and they're labeled R, G, and B. And that corresponds to which color blade you're using. And these lines show you the farthest point where your blade will cut, depending on which blade you're using. If you look here also on the inside of the template, you'll see 3 more lines, and they will give you the lowest cut. So if you're making a cut and you want to be sure that the blade will remain in a zone you want it to cut in, you can use these lines as guides. I noticed that these lines are a bit more slanted, but I believe they mean the same thing, that they represent where your blade will be. The closest is going to cut here, and the farthest there. So I know that I want to cut my paper about 2.5 inches wide using the ripple cut. So I'm going to put my paper fully covering this 0 line here on the 13 by 13 inch mat. I want it fully covered, and then I'm going to put the R line directly on the 0 line. I have positioned my paper on the mat, covering the 0 line just a scant bit over to make sure I'm fully there. And then I'm putting that R line right on the 0 line. Now the line extends a little bit out, so it's very easy to see. So to make sure there's no wiggle on my border tool, I'm going to put some peel in place tape on the top edge and this bottom edge to hold this steady against the paper. So I'm not going for a super tight hold, just the normal give that often happens. And now I'm ready to cut the first cut. And this is a waste, and I'm tossing it. My next step now is to slide my paper over till it touches that 0 line. And I'm rotating my template around such that now my waves are pointing this way. The ripple, if you will, is pointing this way. I have found that when I put the edge of my paper up against this 0 line and I use the lines on my 13 by 13 inch mat aligned with these lines here on the tool, I get a very accurate width to my cut. And I want the width of this to be about 2 1/4 inches. So I want to move this over 2 1/4, and I'm going to put the red line on a mark that up here is 2 1/4. Now, quite frankly, in this particular case, it just happens to be that this peak is lined up with the edge of my paper. That makes this really, really easy. I will put the peel in place tape over this now to kind of secure the paper and the template kind of well together. And I have found that the best place to put this peel in place tape is right over these spots here for the best secure hold, and it doesn't get in the way. Now, I could cut this down like this, but I want to be able to hold this side of my paper better, so I'm going to rotate my whole mat around. So I can have my left hand holding my tool nice and steady, and I can cut with my right hand. Again, 2 1/4 inches, and that should make this whole cut about 2 1/4 of an inch. So now I have this lovely shape reminiscent of an hourglass. And this makes a beautiful border on the page. But you can guess I want a little bit more. So I'm planning to stick with the purple ice theme and do sort of a tone on tone border here. But you know, a straight line is not going to be enough for me. So I have cut a strip that is 3 inches wide, 3 inches this way, about 12 inches. And I'm going to cut this shape, and I think this is beautiful on the straight, but I'm going to put a little bit of finesse on here. So now I have 3 pieces to make 3 layers so far onto my border. I've decided to let this lavender ice piece, which is 3 inches wide, be my bottom layer. And I'm going to cut this middle layer with the geometric frame punch. Now these are by Creative Memories, and they will cut a frame as well as a straight border. I'm cutting straight border today. The way to tell if a border punch by Creative Memories is a frame border punch is to look for that little silver line on the outer edges, whether it's left or right. And when you're cutting the frame, you would make your paper line up to these lines. If you were just cutting your straight border, you use these lines in here, which is what I'm going to do today. The frame punches will punch a nice border around the edge of any paper as long as the dimensions are divisible by 2. So a 4 by 4, 4 by 6, 6 by 8, 8 by 10, 12 by 12, 10 by 10, and you'll get these beautiful shapes. And what is so wonderful, they have been designed to give you good corners. You can try to make a frame with other border punches, but you have to either know the math to cut your paper just right or have wonky corners. These are designed to give you nice, crisp corners. So I'm going to cut my 3 inch by 12 inch piece of paper with the frame punch. I'm using the Post-it note hack to extend the edge of my paper so I can see where to position the paper. And now this makes a beautiful layer on the lavender, and this makes a beautiful layer on the top. Now this makes a lovely layout design. I'm going to get all of this adhered down, and then I'll come back to decorate. I've decided that I want just a little something more on this design. So I'm going to cut one edge of my purple ice cardstock with this wave blade, taking off about 1/8 of an inch, just to put some interest on the page. So I have my border assembled here, and I decided that I wanted a little bit more. So the first thing I did was I pulled out a decorative blade for my 12-inch trimmer, and I used the wave blade. Now, I only cut 1/8 of an inch off on my right-hand side because I'm going to put the left side straight up against the edge of the paper, and it can remain straight. So the next thing I did was I took the green paper that I made the block from, and I made another layer using a Border Maker cartridge. And I really like that, but it needs one more layer. And when I bring over the paper and the photos, I've included every color that's significant in the photos and the paper except the orange. So I'm going to bring in the orange now. So I think I'm going to cut another ripple, but I'm going to cut it both narrow and the mirror of this. So let's see how that works out. So this time, the way I cut before, I cut from the right side inward. This time, I'm going to cut from the left side inward. So my first cut is really going to be pretty simple. All I have to do is to position my tool so that I will get a cut all the way down to the edge of the paper. And that's pretty easy to do. So I'm going to get my ruler on here. And I'm just going to eyeball position it. But I do want it to remain straight. So I'm going to put this place and peel tape on my template to keep it from shifting while I make my very first cut. And I'm cutting it this time on the left-hand side. And the first cut is going to be what some call a waste cut. We're not going to keep it. We're cutting it away. Not keeping this. Well, isn't that just cute? Remember the first waist cut I made with the lavender? And now I have one with this, and they just fit together in the cutest little border. You know I'm going to think of something to use this on, right? Oh, that's so cute. Now I'm turning my paper around. So now I have my first cut, and I'm going to put the paper on here such that the inner piece, these dips are on the zero line. I want the dip on the zero line. Okay, so I've put my edge right here on the zero line, and it just so happens that the peak of this ripple hits the edge of my gray mat. That makes measuring much, much simpler. And I want this to be about 3/4 of an inch at these narrow points. So I'm putting my little R line on the 3/4 inch line, and that should give me a mirror wave that's going to be more narrow than my purple layer and its mirrored image. Let's hope I get this right. So now I have an additional layer. So now I'm going to add these 2 additional layers to this border. And now I'm calling this a Fun-tastic border. I have to say I like how that turned out. And for a monochromatic scrapbooker like myself, I feel very, very fortunate. I like this. This is definitely a big burst of color as far as I'm concerned for my typical scrapbooking. So I really like how I stepped up this border. I have 5 layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which making a 5-layer border for me is a lot of fun. Totally a lot of fun. I have everything adhered down right now and I really like it. But I'll be honest with you, I want a little bit more. To my eye, I want a shelf of something down here. I feel like this big mat is like a flag flapping in the wind on this pole here. So I'm going to put another border down here. This is called the Hummingbird and Flowers Border Punch. And to me, it feels right for this photo and for the story because this is about the memory. There was a hummingbird in this story, just not in these particular photos. Now, my plan is to use 2 colors. I'm going to first cut the border in the canary cardstock. Then I'm going to cut a second one in the purple ice. And I believe that I'm going to let the flowers be canary and the hummingbird. I'm going to cut them apart from the border and piece together the 2 pieces and make the bird in the purple ice. So I made this additional border for the bottom. I cut yellow canary cardstock and then I cut another set of the purple ice pattern paper and I cut away from the purple the hummingbirds. Now I could do a lot more to make more realistic looking hummingbirds, but I'm happy with this as it is. Now I only need about 9 inches. So I'm going to lay it down on my paper and probably cut off a little bit on this side and cut off pretty much up to this flower here and tuck the rest underneath. And I just like this bottom level giving me a bit of a shelf. So now I just have to decide, do I want to position it up here, which I really like, or more down here? And I think I want it touching. think that's going to be it. I'm going to put on a few stickers, and to be honest, I don't think I'll add a title because I'm not sure what I want to call it. And this is our final layout. I went into my collection of some stickers that Creative Memories came out with a few years ago. They were called Totally Tonal, and they were generic stickers based on the colors in the Creative Memories palette. And so you would get a collection of stickers. They would all be in those tonal colors. And I pulled out the purple ice and I grabbed this one there, and the tangerine where I got this sticker, and the Kelly green where I got this. I confess, I'm giving myself a pat on the back for using so many colors on a layout. Inspired by the photos, I pulled out orange, green, yellow, and purple. And I'm thrilled. This is definitely not my typical, and I'm happy about that. I'm happy to be growing outside of my comfort zone. I also really like my 5-layer border, and I'm going to give myself a challenge to make more 5-layer borders. And a quick recap of the various tools I use to make this. I use border punches and frame border punches. I use the border maker system. I use the custom cutting tool. And I use a decorative blade on my 12-inch trimmer. So that tells me that I'm enjoying my tools, toys. And before we get to the close-ups, I would just like to say, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below on what you think of the colors or the style of this layout. Leave a comment of what you think of 5-layer borders if you want to see me make more of them. And YouTube says, here's a video you may like, so I hope you'll watch it.